Okay, to begin with, when you start with an alignment, when you're pulling a car up there to do one of the first things it's a good idea to do is just walk around and see what you see. See if you see any obvious issues with the tires or anything like that. If you see any tires leaning this way, and you see anything that's loose. And so the best alignment system and experienced technician won't ever be able to compensate for damaged or worn components. You can do whatever you want to do lining it up, and if something busted or worn out or bent, you're going to have issues. And so what we want to do is make sure that we're doing this the right way. Now we've got, you guys have seen tire wear patterns that are, you ever seen tires that were worn, they had pretty good tread out here, but the tread was real shallow in the middle? What does that mean? In other words, if your tire's got good heavy tread on the outside, if you're just looking at a tire, but you ain't hardly got no tread, if it's just about slick in the middle, but the tread on both sides is good, what does that mean? Come on, guys.
Wearing normal?
No. If it's got a lot of tread on the side, but very little in the middle, that means it's been overinflated. Too much air. Got that? That's not too hard, is it? All right, so, and tires can wear rapidly on the shoulder, they can wear rapidly in the middle, they can have cracked threads, they can have wear on one side, they can have a feathered edge or bald spots or scalloped wear, which is scalloped wear is like, you've seen these tires that has got these little, looks like somebody's cut out little, well, not little nicks, but they're little scalloped looking, and I can't draw it good. It looks like they're got little dips in them, like around the edge of the tire. It's like they're, scalloped out and all that, and so on and so forth. But you're going to look at the correct air pressure. First thing you're going to check on an alignment. You know that, don't you? Correct air pressure is right. You got to have uniform wear patterns. If you're looking around on all your wheels, you see tires that are not wearing like they're supposed to. You got to make sure that the tires are the correct size and profile. Now, what if I was wanting to, somebody's coming in here and they got one, they don't like the way it's driving, it's dark, or feels harder and all that, and they got some low profile tires, it's not the right ones for the car, it's not going to ride the same as it did if it had the right tires on. Now, how do I know what tires are the right tires for that particular car? Like on your pickup truck. If I walked out to your pickup right now, would I be able to tell, how can I walk up to your truck and tell whether or not you have the right tires on it or not?
Inside of the door.
Open it on the inside the door. You're going to find tire pressure in there. The sticker on some of them, I've seen, this is crazy, but I've seen the sticker on some of these be on the opposite side of the car on the rear door. But most of the time, when you open the door where your VIN sticker is, it'll either be on the VIN sticker or it'll be on another sticker that's on the actual part of the car that the door closes into, which would be the bottom of your B pillar. You know about your pillars, right? You know what A, B, C, and D pillar is on a car? You know what? Do we need to fix these guys up? Do we need to hook them up fast? All right. This is a car. This is a station wagon. Let's just go ahead and make it a station wagon or SUV or crossover, something like that. All right. You got a windshield out here. And between the door and the windshield, okay, no texting while I'm doing this, man. Okay, A, B, C, and then finally in the back is a D pillar. That's A, B, C, and D. Got that? Okay, now what is this right here called? Between the here and where the doors are. What do you call this area right here? That's the belt line. I didn't name it. That's just what they call it. You know what I'm saying? I'm not telling you. I'm not making this up as I go. Doesn't matter what Ford calls it. Of course, different car companies call things different things. I've got a tire pressure monitor system out there, to reset those things, and it's made by OTC. And there's a book. There's actually 2 books this thick that you got to flip through and find your car so you can find the rules and regulations for that tire pressure monitor system. Because everybody's tire pressure monitor system is different. And I think, and this is kind of dumb on my part maybe, but I think all cars ought to have a tire pressure monitor system that's standard.
Yeah.
They ought to have the same daggum one. The sensors ought to be just alike, because wheels ain't that much different in most cases. And they don't even have to put, like on my pickup truck, it's got the little, the sensor is banded inside the wheel. It ain't even on the valve stem. But now it doesn't tell me which tire is low either, it just pops on the tire line. Anyway, A, B, C, and D, belt line. And that's where you're, basically also, let's talk about that while we're here. You've got your wheel, your tire and your wheel, and you got your fender here. All right, if I'm going to measure ride height, and that's important when it comes to alignment, how am I going to measure the ride height? How am I going to measure the ride height? Where am I going to measure from to? Like if I want to measure the ride height on Archie's vehicle, and I want to make sure that it's accurate.
And from the bottom of the rim to the...
That's exactly right. I'm going to go from right here to right there, if you're going to do it the right way. Now, some other publications might talk about it a different way. That's the accurate way to do it. Why would you not measure it from here to the ground?
Here's your tires.
Tires, yeah. There you go. So, but if you want to get it good, you want the good solid thing, you can measure all the way around. From there to there is going to be a good firm measurement that you can go with. All right. You're going to check the action of the shock absorbers by bouncing the vehicle to see if the movement's properly dampened. It says, you know, in the handout material, it says bounce in the rear of the vehicle. But there was a Cadillac that we had in here that was an 05 Cadillac crossover. And whenever you pulled up in there, and I've got a video of it that I got somewhere, when you pull up in there and hit your brake on that Cadillac crossover, it would go boing, 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 about that many times. It was bad. And the shocks on that thing were over $100 a piece, but they needed shocks in the front. And that was on an 05 Cadillac. You know, so, and it was just bouncing up a storm. And the woman that drove the car knew the shock absorbers were the problem. She said, this thing needs shocks, you know. That ain't really hard. Correct size and profile of the tires, appearance of more wear patterns, and then shock absorbers. And you look at optional suspension equipment like heavy-duty handling or trailer tow suspension or something like that. You know, leaf springs, extra leaf springs in there and that kind of stuff. Vehicle attitude for evidence of possible overload. In fact, attitude means if it's drooping on one side or the other. Like for instance, if somebody brings a vehicle in for an alignment and it looks like it's got the ride height's lower on the right side, you need to be popping the trunk to see if there's something in there like dead bodies or whatever that's going to make it be, you know.
What kind of jack we can borrow?
Tell David to call me and ask if you can borrow a jack. Because you guys have been running out of here with my jack every day, and sooner or later it's going to be gone, and I'm going to hear, not me, not me, not me. Okay, tell him to call me. Go back and tell him to call me, and after he called me, you can borrow the jack, okay? You're putting up with that nonsense. That's ridiculous. These guys are every day coming to borrow my jack. I don't like that.
Why do they gotta have the jack?
We're welding something, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And when students come over here wanting to borrow stuff, they may not bring it back, and I'm not putting up with that. Let me get my phone so when David calls, I can answer it.
Number one is I'm in school on Monday.
Hey, I had a good reason.
I mean, I've seen too much of that kind of stuff, though. When if you're real free and easy, loaning them your stuff, after a while, they just come and they clean you out. And then nobody knows where it went. You got to act like you got to act kind of like you don't want to loan it to them, and you don't like loaning it to them, then they think twice about coming to borrow it. You know, so, but I called David yesterday and told him about that. Anyway, I don't want to get caught up on that. That's ridiculous. All right, so you're going to look for evidence of sheet metal repair. It's going to indicate that it's been in an accident. Look to see if it's been bent, okay? It's kind of funny, that girl that worked over at the Ford place as a salesperson told me that this guy came and said, was trading in a car, and she says, has this car been wrecked? And he says, what if it has and I don't tell you that it has? She said, well, what we do is when we sell it to the customer, we tell him what you told us, which is what had never been wrecked. And then if he finds out later it has been wrecked, well, it's because somebody's working on it, they find something, then he sues us, and then we sue you. And that guy says, well, it's been hit over here, and it's been, he starts telling her all this stuff then, you know. But people are going to try to get by with something, you know. Now, how many of you guys have ever jacked up a vehicle that had air suspension on it without turning off the air suspension? You would get a chance to if you ever worked on that black Crown Victoria we got, because it's got air suspension on it. Have you done it? Have you jacked it up without? Have you ever jacked it up without turning it off?
No.
What happens is whenever the weight of the car comes off the axle drops down. The ride height sensor says, "My gosh, we're setting up too high. We got to let all the air out of the airbags." And so it lets all the air out of the airbags, trying to lower the car. And then when it gets all the air let out, it's done all it can do, and the airbags are totally flat. because they ain't got regular springs on it, it's just got airbags in the rear on that one. There can do it on all four rounds if it's a Continental or some of these other cars. You lower the doggone thing all the way down, and it's squatting down on the lift, and you can't get the lift out from under it. Make you feel plumb silly. You know what I mean? So you fire it up, and the air compressor kicks on, you know, it raises it back up. Pontiac, Montana, and some of these GM cars, they've got air shocks on them that level the load, and it works real smooth. You know, it's pretty cool how that kind of thing. Just make sure that you know on the SUVs, well, the Ford SUVs, it's going to be in front of the passenger's right foot. There's a switch in there inside the car. On the Crown Victorias and stuff, and then Lincolns, it's going to be in the trunk. You pop the trunk, you're going to see a rocker switch in there. It says off and on. You turn it off, raise it up, and you'll remember to turn it back on, because when you get in the car and crank it up, you're going to see an air suspension light on. Okay? All right, now. So you're going to disable the air suspension. You're going to put it on the rack. If the rack's got ramps, drive it on the rack. If it Huh? No, actually, I'm going over the handout that test came from. See what I'm saying? So, I mean, I'm just giving you the pre-test stuff. This is stuff you need to hear, so I'm telling you that. But this particular handout is important for that test, and that's where this test came from. You got to have it centered, and you got to make sure each wheel in the vehicle is directly over the center of the slip plates. You know the slip plates that we drive on to when we pull onto the lift, you know, and the turn plates and all, and it's got these little holes in here that you put these pins in and all that kind of stuff. That wheel needs to be sitting right dead in the center. You know, the signature of that wheel, it needs to be right in the center of that plate. And you know, a lot of the times people will, you know, have it sloppy. Now the cool thing about the alignment lift the way you go out now, if you put them things on there and you follow the instructions on the screen, you can park it on there and then put the sensors on there, make sure that they're free, roll the thing back so that the wheel turns 45 degrees, and then it'll tell you to roll it back forward, and all those sensors are compensated. You know how we used to have to punch the sensors? Well, now that thing, the new software he put on there, it doesn't have the big paddle plates on it. It's just got the plain old camera heads on it. But you roll it back 45 degrees, you roll it back forward, and they're compensated all at one time. Real handy, yeah. That's the way it is. I mean, that's been changed. And you guys, a lot of you guys need to be practicing these alignments, because in steering and suspension, you need to be, every time you get a chance, you need to throw a vehicle on there and do an alignment on it, so you can get really comfortable with that. You know, this business of I've done one time and now I know, you know, that's nonsense. You know, you're supposed to you're supposed to saturate yourself with this stuff. Now, I can tell you that Archie's going to be saturating himself with a transmission that's probably going to take him several days on end to figure out. But that's okay. He shall not surely die. Yep. Okay. Raise the vehicle off the floor and grab the lower and upper surfaces of the tire. Rock it. See if you feel slop. Go this way. Rock it. See if you feel slop. If you go this way and you feel slop, what kind of problem you got? Depends on the suspension, doesn't it? Ball joints, bearings, stuff like that. What if you rock it this way and you got slop? What is that? What about your tie rods? You know, tie rods, inner or outer tie rod ends can be sloppy. But whatever happens is, they also have what we call a dry park check. When you lay under the car on a creeper and you get under there with the weight of the car sitting on there and you have somebody turn the wheel back and forth while you see what's loose. That is extremely important when we're doing vehicle inspections on these 15-passenger vans. It's extremely important. So keep that in mind. If the wheels shake from the top to the bottom, you're going to look at wheel bearings and, you know, ball joints and that kind of thing. Look for loose suspension, steering nuts and bolts, steering gear mounting. Make sure the steering gear is not bouncing around loose in there. Broken or worn suspension springs, leaking or damaged shock absorbers, steering shaft U-joints. There was a Nissan Altima that came in here that drove funny. And the lady, it was a 04. And she says, this thing just doesn't drive right. And she said, I can't describe exactly what it's doing, but if I drive down, it just doesn't feel like it's supposed to when I'm turning. And I've got that steering shaft out there on the bench. And that steering shaft U-joint, one side is going clink, 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 the other side's stiff. And that was on an 04 Altima, see. It was just like a U-joint. You know how they do on a car? It was a littler U-joint, same kind of way two of them dried out and just started to seize up. And when every time, see, that U-joint was at an angle. I could get that thing, show it to you. Remind me before the end of the day, I'll show it to you. But it's one side's real stiff and the other, it's got the cross yoke like any kind of a U, and two of them were real free and the other one wasn't. All right, you're going to look at your steering shaft U-joints, look for boots, rips, cuts, or leaks, dragging brakes, that kind of thing. And, look at your ride height. That machine out there tells you exactly where and how to measure ride height on every vehicle and all that. So you're going to take your head and put it on there, and there's a compensation. Like I said, you can roll this one back and forth. Make sure you put the head on there severely. You put the bungee cords on there so my sensors don't fall off. You know how to do an alignment? You done alignment before? All right then. Were you able to do one on your Corvette, or could the sensor not see around it? One couldn't see it, did it? All right, if the vehicle suspension hadn't settled after you raise it up, it's going to cause incorrect measurements. So what you're supposed to do is bounce the vehicle and let it find where it wants to be. You know how important that is? Sometimes at the dealership, if we had one that had some sort of a crazy body boom or something, what I'm saying is, like if engine torsional vibration was being transmitted to the frame, we would loosen all the mounts to where they were just loose as a goose. Get on all the bolts, loosen all the mounts, and then we would get in the car and put it in drive, put it in forward gear, and let the powertrain wiggle around and move around, and just let it find where it was wanting to be. And that loosens up whatever bound up rubber mounts you may have. Tighten all that stuff back up, and you'd be surprised how that smooths one out. How many times do you think of doing something like that? You figure if you can cram them bolts in there and the balance be all tight, you'd be okay. But anyway, all right. So you got your caster swing on your turning plates. You're going to go back and forth on that, and so on and so forth. You're going to perform your adjustments like you need to do and all that. Okay. Now then, let's move on down here. The only time wheel alignment adjustments should be made is when, everybody remember this? Get your pen ready, you guys. Get your pen ready and write this down. I want you to commit it to memory. When the measurement is out of specifications or the side-to-side difference is great enough to cause pull or a wear pattern. When the measurement's out of specifications or the side-to-side difference is great enough to cause a pull or wear pattern. Most of the shops that do that $29.95 alignment or whatever are just setting toe, and they'll tell you that. Second part is side-to-side difference is great enough to cause a pull or wear pattern. If it's causing the tires to wear, or it's pulling one way or another, and you also got to make sure that you understand, if the tires look like they're kind of old or mismatched or something like that, it's kind of silly to check alignment angles on one if the guy has got a 255 tire on one side and a 235 tire on the other side, and one tire is narrower than the other, and they're obviously going to roll it over, have rolling. Sometimes even if the tires look real good, one of them can have rolling resistance, the other one doesn't have, and that car will pull off to the right, and the tires look good. So if you switch the tires left to right and it pulls the other way, you got a tire pull. I mean, it's just not rocket science there. You got what I'm saying? If you look under there, if you got one that's pulling, and you can have a pretty wear pattern. It looks nice and even, but if it's pulling, air pressure check is the first darn thing you do. You know what I'm saying? Anybody that don't do an air pressure check flunks the final exam. Okay, remember that? You're going to be doing an alignment and on that. Most caster and camber adjustments on late model vehicles are performed with what? A, eccentric cams, B, shim packs, C, slotted trunnions, or D, tie rod sleeves. And we're talking caster and camber. Now remember, what is camber? Camber is this, and caster is the steering axis, right? Okay, so you're going to use what for that? Shim packs? Now we're talking late model vehicles here now, like the newer ones. Shim packs is what you used to use a long time ago. And it was you'd actually had bolts. Well, your upper control arm, if you looked at it from the top, you had this thing that your upper control arm was coming off of, and here's your A-frame bushings, you call it. Right. All right. That thing was bolted to the frame, and there was these bolts right here. You had shims that you put in there. Like if you put shims in there, loosen the bolt so that there was space in there, and you had shims of various thicknesses that you put in there. And you'd have maybe 2 or 3 shims here and 3 or 4 there. That would actually move the ball joint that way. If you're going to change the camber to the positive,
so make a turn like this.
Yeah, that's actually going to change it, or it's going to move. It's either going to, what you're doing when you do caster and camber is you're either moving that ball joint out and in for camber,
Right.
or you're moving the ball joint forward and backward for caster. You got that?
Yes, I do. I never thought about that.
Yeah. So if you're moving, you know, for the top, I'm talking about the top ball joint. Now, some of them have a lower ball joint adjustment with an eccentric. You know, like we walked under a car, and I think it was that Toyota Highlander that girl had in here that we did an oil change on. If you walk up there and you look at the lower control arms, there's eccentric cams on the lower control arms on hers.
Like the bolt's got a cam.
Yeah, the bolt where it mounts has got an offset cam, and when you loosen that bolt, now you got to recognize if you turn that cam around and around, it's just going to go back and forth. You know, so you can only go so far with alignments, basically. That's it. But that particular one, if you add shims here, you're going to move that joint back.
Right.
If you subtract them there, you're going to move it forward. If you're setting your, once you get that like you want it and you're setting your camber, you're going to add one here and add one there.
Right.
See what I'm saying? And that's how you're going to make that happen. So, you know, you're doing that.
I've never seen one like that before, though.
Yeah, the older ones, as a matter of fact, some of the doggone, like if you go to like a 01, 02 Chevy S10, they're still like that.
Yeah, but I mean, that's smart right there. That's
Yeah.
easy.
Well, it is, but it's not. It's kind of aggravating because you got to loosen all that and stick that in there and tighten it back up. Nowadays, you know, you can actually do a live adjustment on your camber. Now, on the caster, you got to do a new sweep for the most part. But anyway, that's how that goes. Now, this same adjustment is done with eccentrics on the newer vehicles.
Right.
Like that Ranger out there, I had Derek put brand new eccentrics on it so that y'all could experiment with this on that Ranger real easy because everything's just brand new. A lot of the stuff that we do on these particularly on rear suspension, the doggone adjustments are all froze up, and you got to replace some of the parts. So the Neon was, and we fixed it, but with some new ones. And those little old parts are pretty expensive too. The uniform person. I thought I smelled something. I noticed the welding instructor never called me. Isn't that something?
Your stuff's back. Mended like it's supposed to.
Well, I certainly appreciate that. Is this time for me to pay you? It sure is. I'm going to get you paid.
If you want to wait till next week, that's fine with me.
Well,
You're on a charter anyway, so.
what now?
So you're on a charter account anyway.
I'm on a church account. Well, since I'm doing a lecture right now,
That's fine. You wait till.
yeah, I don't want these in here. Put them on my desk. Yeah.
I'm just.
I'll pay you next week. All right. That works. Okay, now let me ask you this: after adjusting caster, camber, and toe, what should be done to prevent damage to the slip plates? Number 2, by the way, was A. That was eccentric cams. Number 3, after adjusting caster, camber, and toe to prevent damage to the slip plates, you're supposed to do what?
I thought you said it was Shimpax.
No, Shimpax was older ones.
Oh, okay.
The newer ones have got eccentric cams. We talked a lot about the Shimpax because you asked how it works. That's why we got into that so
Okay,
deep.
I got you.
But what are you supposed to do to keep the slip plates being the round plates? You know that I'm always talking about. You know how we stop the car just before you get onto those slip plates, and then you leave it in neutral, put chocks behind it so it won't come off of the dadgum lift, and you roll it forward by hand by grabbing a tire, and you stop it right where it needs to be, and then you chock the front and the rear of one of the if the rear tire is front of one tire, whatever. So you don't want it rolling around. You got to make sure everything don't roll off the lift. That one boy up there at Ballard Tire drove a old Chevelle or something off into it was an old car, like a 68 Chevelle that the clutch and everything was real loose and sloppy on, and he drove it off into the front end machine. Like that. And so, well, no, he didn't. But, and I knew he was kind of goofy, but I told him, I said, you need to leave that place. Of course, I can kind of understand, give him a big old ratty old hot rod car that's got floppy clutch pedals on it and it lurches forward. You know what I'm saying? But I'm not saying it was okay for him to do that. But this guy says, and I said, he needs to put somebody on that lift that's not going to make that mistake. And so he got this really good, solid, experienced front end man and put him on that lift to do the work, because that guy that was up there that had come from here to go do alignments, but he was just getting started. And that brand new, super duper hot shot front end man drove the next car off there onto the front end machine. The new front end machine they just bought, the guy that he put on there to replace the other guy, he drove one off too. So what I'm saying is, just be darn sure that you don't ever make a mistake like that. You got to be absolutely certain. You better be watching on that. You know, and if you don't know how to drive a stick, you know, you need to learn before you leave here. We got something you learn how to drive a stick on. I had one guy that had to come back here, and I had to show him. I mean, I had to let him practice on that little car we got going up on the lift, because he was having to drive up on a drive-on lift at the dealership where he was working, and he just had trouble with that.
That dude man had a wild looking hair.
Yeah.
Shady? Yeah, shady.
Yeah, but anyway, so according to the handout, what's probably the most difficult part of performing an alignment? Interpreting alignment measurements is the most important part.
What was number 3's?
Reinsert the pins in the turn plates. I should have told you that. I got sidetracked. You know, the 2 pins that hold the plate so it don't move. Now, too many times what I have people do on that regard is whenever they've got the pins pulled out, they've made all their adjustments, they're done, they got a front wheel drive car, they put it in reverse, and the front wheel drive, you know, as soon as the wheels start trying to turn, it slams the plates forward, and that's like a $500 a piece for those plates. And you treat those things like you paid for them with your bank account and emptied it when you bought them, okay? Because you know, you're going to be, you know, anytime you're working with somebody else's expensive equipment, you need to treat it like it's gold, and because it is for him. So interpreting alignment measurements is the hard thing on number 4. Which of the following is not a method of adjusting caster and camber? Shim packs, bushings, elongated holes, or threaded sleeves?
Threaded sleeves.
Threaded sleeves. You don't do caster and camber with threaded sleeves. Not typically. As soon as I say that, some yo-yo will have built a dadgum car and they use threaded sleeves to do that, you know, so just be aware of the fact that we're talking generalities here. Caster is adjusted by moving what piece inward or outward, caster being the steering axis front and back, right? The upper control arm is typically the one corner of it will be moved, and I've got that thing over there you can horse around with. Actually, that thing built out of wood is really handy to look at. Mike Moore built that to show somebody about alignment whenever at his tire shop over there.
Caster would be the upper control arm?
Upper control arm is typically what you're going to move on that. Now, like I say, on some of these cars, you're going to see adjustments on the lower control arm, so be aware of that too. Camber is adjusted by moving what piece inward or outward. Upper control arm, same thing. You're going to be doing that. And that's just, like I say, this is generality. This is general steering and suspension alignment stuff. We don't like much being done here, so let's just keep going. When adjusting toe on a 98 F Series pickup, each increment of the notches on the frame represents 0.4 degrees, and that is true. Service adjuster bushings are used to adjust caster and camber on some F Series trucks, and that is true. And as a matter of fact, Brent had a bunch of that stuff that he sent down here that he wanted to sell. That was just a bunch of stuff he put in stock for one of the tire shops in town so that they wouldn't have to wait for it to get there. And he had some of these service bushings, and it's an eccentric bushing that goes around the upper ball joint, and you can actually get different ones to change that, you know, your camber and caster. Now you got some numbers on this bushing right here. This bushing right here, this is a sort of a, this is an eccentric bushing right here. All right, you see the numbers on that bushing? See it on your paper? You got that? The numbers on that bushing. You notice that this one right here has got that little tongue right there, which is not anything that you're going to have on the replacement one. Okay, on that thing right there, this one here, you notice it's got a prefix and a suffix for a Ford part number. The first number, you got to write this down and remember it. That's the amount of caster. Notice it says plus. It says EG7AFA. That's your part number. Then it's got plus 3/8, and then it's got minus 1/4. And these are degrees, right? The first number is amount of caster. The second number is amount of camber in degrees if the adjuster is installed in the right-hand axle position. First number is the amount of caster. The second number is the amount of camber in degrees if the adjuster is installed in the right-hand axle position. If the adjuster is in the left-hand axle, the caster number is the opposite sign of the number shown. A positive amount in the right-hand axle is a negative amount in the left-hand axle. So the benchmark is the right-hand axle, don't you see? And that's what this was marked for. and a negative amount in the right-hand axle is a positive amount in the left-hand position. So that sounds complicated, but all you got to do is think about what you're doing. If you're trying to move your steering axis so that the top is farther back, you know which way you're going with your casters. Is everybody pretty happy with all that? You understand what we're talking about here?
Number 4.
Interpreting alignment measurements is the answer to number 4 on the front. Where's Levi at today?
I don't know. I had to get a ticket done.
All right. All right. And let me show y'all a picture or two on this thing, and then we'll be done with that.